shooté. Oui, j'ai déjà fait le rapatriement là. C'est bon? Ouais, mais non. Florent, déjà la message. C'est juste un petit peu.
Good morning, everybody. We're going to start. So first of all, welcome to this first oral presentation of our M2 projects. A warm thank you to you all to be here, so the jury. And special thanks to the jury. We have a variety of studios that are represented today. Thank you for being here. So you are a representative of editors, studios, but also of the diversity of the functions we have in the video game industry. So your feedbacks will be very valuable for the students. So for the one who are new, you have got an email explaining that you can collect, and we ask you to kindly fill a sheet on internet where you can express all your remarks or your suggestions for the students. This will be shared to the students just after. You have the link here. You have the Wi-Fi connection and the password. And we really want to thank you to be here. Thank you for the audience as well, so the students to be there too. So just maybe a few words for a reminder of what we are going to see today. So our M2 students have been asked to work on the conception and on the pre-production of a video game. So we have 6 teams that are organized as little studios, 6 projects, each team a project. And they have 4 months to deliver a vertical slice explaining and showing what they intend to do in their game. This whole process started the 18th of October, so about 3 weeks ago. Now we are at the first oral presentation. There's going to be 3 other encounters. The next one will be during the Engmin game conference that will take place in mid-December. The jury doesn't have to be there, but you're warmly welcome if you want to join. And there will be also the next oral presentation mid-January, and the final one with all the deliverables that are expected at mid-February. I don't know if you have any questions about that. If you have no problem with connection. Then this first oral presentation is the time to make the transition between the godfathers and mothers. We're going to see that. So first of all, I would like to thank one of our particular member of the jury today, David Bowman, who was our who was the godfather of the P14 cohort. So maybe David, if you want to come. So David is the studio development director of Creative Assembly, and maybe you have a few words to tell us.
Thank you. Good morning. So I spent a year with the students, having some conversations, helping try to guide the process, answer questions about the industry and about game development particulars. It was probably more beneficial to me than it was to them. When you stay connected to people who are at the very front of making games and thinking new thoughts, it keeps you young, keeps you connected. And so I'm very, very confident that your new godmother will be able to provide to you different insights, new insights, but will also gain as much as I did over that last year. So I hope you have a very good experience through this next 4 months, and I'm sure you'll get good guidance.
Thank you very much. So thank you, David. Thank you for having been a great godfather and having accepted to be there again this year as a jury member. So as we said, we make the transition from godfather to godmother. Here is Audrey Le Prince, our godmother this year for the P15 cohort. She's not right here physically, but she's there through Skype, so maybe we can discuss with her. Hi, Audrey. I think we have to switch the... She's there, but she's not there.
Am I there?
I'm afraid that the people can't see you right now. Yes.
That's okay.
So, hi, Audrey.
Hello. Can you hear me well?
Yes,
Yeah?
we can.
Perfect. Well, hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy, and I also want to say that I'm very happy that Julie Chalmette and Farana Zelai are here in the room with me because they're kind of accompanying me while I accompany you to be your godmother this year. I'm just going to say a few words because there's a few things that really matter to me about being the godmother of this promotion. The first thing is that the CNAM is very important to me, the CNAM Engine, because as you might know, Aymeric Toa, who is the co-founder of Game Bakers, studied at the CNAM. He was probably one of the ancestors of the training you're getting today. So it's another example of how many examples of alumni who have left the school and done great things like you are going to do. And also because the CNAM is, I think, very important for the French industry. I guess you know a little bit, since I'm your godmother, that diversity is very important to me. I think it's an essential component of growth, personal growth, team growth, cultural growth, society growth. So really listening and discovering to the world around us is very important. And the CNAM has this role to play in there, in our industry, because it's the only public school, or at least the best public school we have, that provides a training that is affordable. And diversity is not just about mixity and gender and ethnic origins or sexual orientation. It's also about social classes. So for me, it's very important part to play. This school has a very important part to play, and I'm very happy to be working with you this year. But just to come back to the jury, I wanted to say one more thing, because we're going to be here and we're going to review your work and results of hours of hard work and creativity and teamwork and sweat. And it's going to be a difficult moment, I guess. I mean, I still don't like getting feedback. And I wanted to tell you two things. Is one, I think it's probably one of the most important things you're going to learn in this school is how to listen to feedback and how to react to it. Because we do that all the time. I always hoped when I was a kid, I hoped, well, when I'm a grown-up, I will not have to listen to my parents anymore. Or when I have my own studio, I will not have to listen to anyone anymore. But actually, we still do have to listen to people all the time. Indies that go to pitch a new project to a publisher. Yves Guillemot, who pitches his is the financial year to his investors, or even when we read the comments on the forums, right, from the players about our games, we get feedback all the time. So it's important to know what to do with feedback. And you're going to say, well, okay, she's going to tell us to listen to feedback. And yes, I will. But I would also like to tell you not to listen to feedback. And especially to the people in the room that are coming with something very different and very new. And maybe also especially to the women in the room. It's important that you get what you need from what you hear, but you also decide sometimes not to act on feedback, not to listen, because you're the future. You're here to surprise us, and you're actually here to make us very wrong. So I hope that's going to happen, and you're going to make the next revolutions. I don't know if the people who did Minecraft or Pokemon or Fortnite listened to a tremendous amount of feedback and improved, or if they also managed to follow a vision that they had, and that possibly some people on the way told them they were going to fail. But they didn't. So yes, please listen, understand, act if you have to, but also choose not to act and listen to your vision. Well, that's about it. This is what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Julie. Audrey, sorry. So as you know, Audrey is a founder of Game Bakers. She's also a co-founder of Women in Games. She's also a co-founder of Wings Interactive. And the specificity of, maybe we can go back to the presentation, one of the specificity she brings to the cohort. So many thanks to both of the godfather and godmother. Maybe the next, it's me, sorry. Is that she doesn't come alone, as she said. Julie Chalmette, who is the manager director of Bethesda France, and Farhanaz Elahi, who is independent author, illustrator, animator, will be there, and they are here in the jury to accompany also the students. So it's a rich year this year. Thank you very much for that. But now you're here to listen to the teams. So 6 teams, 6 games. They will each present for 10 minutes their projects. We'll have each time 20 minutes for question and answers. You can have also the opportunity to visit their working place during the breaks, especially at lunchtime and maybe at the end of the day. So if you don't have further questions, it's not working. Yes, let's go. Thank you very much. And the first team is Canopy.
Thank you.
You are now in the forest, and it's tall, and it's big and huge. There are unending trees, but there are also hostile creatures. Be careful. Welcome to Canopy. In Canopy, you will play as a spiritual climber who has lost the use of an arm. You will have to find what's above the canopy, but to do that, you will have to surpass yourself and beware of hostile creatures. Those creatures that can come from the real world as well as the spiritual world. We are aiming in our game for an exploration and adventure kind and a dark fantasy staging. We will use a third-person camera with 3D environments and characters. Okay, the world in which the player will actually evolve is one planet that's divided into 9 layers. Those layers come from the layer number 1, that's a very hot and burning center, to layer number 9, that's the ice cold and very windy surface of the planet. Each layer has its own organization and inhabitants. For example, in the first layers, you have a tribe that is sedentary and that lives on very big tree branches. While in the 5th layer, you will have a nomadic tribe that's using the vines to go always higher and higher because they're aiming to discover what's above the canopy. Both tribes, they know each other, but their knowledge, it stops at their layers, the layers 4 and 5. They don't know what's above and what's below. Now, let me introduce you to the forest itself. Oh no. The forest is huge, the trees are impossibly big, but it's hostile. There are creatures and beasts all around. And also you can find in it the dark and moody feeling. And to actually emphasize that feeling, we are aiming to focus on the lightning and the fog effects. In terms of sound design, we are looking for an anxiety-provoking mood that fits the visual direction, and also for strange sounds that come from unidentified sources. We want drones with world music. Also, as audio references, we have Penumbra and The Last of Us. Now let's talk about Yasha. Yasha is our main character, the playable character, and she's an animistic climber who has lost her arm. So since she has lost it, she cannot actually use it, but we are thinking about what it will be replaced by, still iterating on that. When you begin the game, you embody Yasha on a journey when she wants to discover what lies at the top of the forest. And as she's about to make a breakthrough and see what's above, she falls, and she's left for dead in a biome that is unknown to her kind. When she wakes up, she realizes she has lost her arm and she cannot use it, so she cannot climb like she used to, like a tribe does. And this is where the game starts for the player.
So, at the beginning of the game, Yasha is wounded. She needs to rejoin the sedentary tribe to heal, and then she learns that she can't climb anymore. She aims for finding the exploratory tribe. She wants to climb anyway, even if she doesn't know how to, and then she will develop a new kind of climbing. On her way to the top, she will encounter spirits, and then discovers that she needs to find her own way to the top and her own way to climb. At the end of the game, she might discover new things, have a new understanding of the world, and define her new goals. As a level breakdown, you might begin by climbing very tall trees, like with a very strong verticality. You will then enter a new zone, discover it, look for spirits, look for understanding on how you can climb higher, and you will learn from the spirits and enhance your powers. So, Yasha has only one arm to climb. She can't climb like everyone else in her tribe, and she then develops her own way to climb. She propels herself with one arm with force, like with really animalistic, in a really animalistic way. Through the game, she will use spiritual powers to enhance her movement abilities, for example, by dashing, double jumping, or things like that. But there is also a second part to the gameplay, apart from moving. It's the exploration. You will use your spiritual sight to switch between two worlds, the real world and the spiritual world. You will need to find new paths. You will need to find hidden spirits. On your way through this environment, you will walk around hostile creatures, be endangered by the height of the trees and simply by falling. And you will meet gigantic spirits that will challenge you, for example, in races, in stealth, or stuff like that. And you will learn from them so that you can climb higher, and discover what's at top.
So, we have identified some challenges that we could encounter during the development. So we'll have to keep an eye on performances. You will be in a huge forest filled with foliages. So we need to make sure that the game stay fluid. Our artistic direction is quite realistic. We need a lot of variety in the models and the textures. So we also want the models to be quite detailed. We have already begun to work on lightings, ambient effects, these kind of things, to make sure that the mood and the feelings that we want to give to the player are working. About the camera, we have a third-person camera. We will have to deal with the classical problems that came with it, like if you collide with a wall, for example, and what do you do with the camera? Do you get it closer to the player, things like this? But we will also have to deal with the objective that will always be up. So we will have to come with interesting camera placement to make sure that we always see where we need to go. The last one is the character animation. We will use iKey to make sure that the hands and the foot of the character is not going inside the tree, for example. And yeah, we need the animation to be clean to not get the player out of the game. We have also identified the selling point of our game, what is the most interesting for the player, the points that we want to make visible in our vertical slice. So we have the climbing, we have the verticality and the giantism. You will encounter giant beasts. You will get the thrill of height when you are very high in the trees. And of course our dark fantasy mode. So our game will be available on PC and console. We are developing it with Unity and Wise. We are mainly targeting teenagers to adults. And our economic model is premium, so you pay a fixed price to get the game. Thanks.
Can the rest of the team go down?
So it's time for question. Before the question, I will ask you to tell your name and your function, if you mind, if you don't, if you please. So first question? Yeah, thank you.
Good morning. You have broken this into 4 stages. You're trying to do a vertical slice in 4 months. You're not going to be able to get through all those stages. Tell us what your plan is.
Our plan is to go to the mid-game part of the game. So we will skip the introduction, the start of the game where Yasha is wounded, and the early game, and focus on a level in mid-game. So, for example, for example, yeah, in mid-game, as a level breakdown, we wrote that we would like to. Sorry, I'm going to skip to the slide so we can have context.
That one.
Yeah, this one. So we want to focus on the mid-game, so encountering spirits, discovering a zone, because quite the representative part of our game. The war moments will be included in that part, like encountering spirits, evolving, understanding how your character learns how to climb higher. So that's why we want to focus on this part rather than on other parts, because it represents good layers of what we want to do, climbing sequence and exploratory sequence, and our war moments with encountering the spirits.
Thank you. Other questions?
Hello, Rémi Boutin from Ubisoft Bordeaux. You talked about creatures like monsters, but you didn't describe how you interact with them. Do you fight the monster? Do you flee the monster? Because you talked about platforming, but not other verbs that the player can do.
Yeah, that's actually a good question. We want to really think about how we can interact with these monsters, if it's only in platforming or with other kind of interactions. We find it interesting to have different kind of monsters, some who might be hostile, some who might be more friendly, some who might lie in a gray area. And so their behavior might dictate how we view the challenge. If it's stealth, for example, for an hostile character, so still using platforming, but with also detections in the environment, and using the environment not as a way to climb, but as a way to hide. We also thought about maybe you have to flee the monster because it's chasing you, so more actiony part of the game, still platforming, but really with an emphasis on input execution. We are also thinking about other kinds of challenges, like searching stuff in the environment, using your climbing in an unusual way. So that's what we want to focus on in the next week, is to find what is the most interesting challenge for us to develop in the vertical slice, what makes sense also in the game. So yeah, different kind of challenges, and we are still looking into it.
Thanks.
Hello, Salomé Strapazon from Ubisoft Bordeaux 2. On your game, can you be more specific how climbing will be unusual without the harm? Do you have any specific ideas?
Yeah. So at first we thought about climbing as the most usual way of climbing, up, down, left, right, as we can see it in Zelda, for example, Breath of the Wild, the recent one. But we decided to break it down and to constrain it. In that example that we can see on the right, so Yasha can't climb up and down like everyone else, but she needs to propel herself, use her momentum, and really aim at where she needs to go. It also expresses our character and our wants to climb, even if it's like violent and hard. She really wants it, and this mechanic of propelling herself, like catapulting, is really expressive of that rage, inner rage. So we want to exploit that kind of gameplay, and we are still trying to figure out how we can use this constraint to use the environment in another way, like with using balance with one arm and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you.
Vous m'entendez? Je sais pas si vous m'entendez.
Oui.
Oui, super. J'ai pas vu toutes les slides très précisément, on va faire des petits ajustements sur la caméra, mais est-ce que vous avez donné quels seraient les jeux en concurrence avec le vôtre? Est-ce que vous avez parlé de ça?
Ah oui, pardon. Oui, on a un peu cherché comment on pourrait se positionner par rapport aux autres jeux. On a des positionnements différents, que ce soit en termes de mood ou en termes de mécanique. En termes de mood, on essaie de se rapprocher un peu d'un mood dark fantasy. Et donc les références vers lesquelles on va, c'est Hellblade et Bloodborne, en termes vraiment d'univers et de fantasy. En termes de mécanique, ensuite, c'est un petit peu plus dur de se positionner puisqu'on est dans un environnement plutôt réaliste avec des mécaniques pas 100% arcade, mais pas 100% réaliste non plus dans la grimpe, donc comme dans un Assassin's Creed ou dans un Uncharted avec des animations procédurales. On a plus une mécanique mixée. Et dans ce cas-là, la concurrence est un peu plus difficile à identifier, mais on est toujours en train de chercher où est-ce qu'on pourrait se positionner justement avec notre mécanique qui est à la fois un peu arcade, à la fois un peu réaliste. Donc on est toujours en train de chercher exactement en termes de mécanique où est-ce qu'on se positionne là-dessus.
Hello, back to English. So thanks for the presentation. My name is Benoit, I'm from Ubisoft as well. Quite close to Salome's questions about the climbing itself. It seems to be like the key features you have. You mentioned the propelling aspect, so potentially physicality, targeting, and all the stuff. You have to have a game that can hold players for a long time. What type of variety do you see? I know that it's something that you guys are currently working on, but it's also the core fundamental of your experience. Do you have other variety in mind in terms of climbing experience? Or do you think that only this propelling logic can hold through the whole game? And do you intend to push and to work this one in the variety in your proto? Or do you intend to have like one or two ways to innovate on the climbing experience?
That's a good question because that's also what we are looking into right now. We, of course, want to include variety in our way to climb. At first, the propelling mechanic will be new, but as you said, it can really get old fast. And that's why we want to have a different way to use it, whether it be because you realize that propelling can be used maybe for going down as well, for having momentum to jump afterwards, or we can use it by varying the environment. Maybe you can use this propelling to grab a liana for balancing after that, and might want to develop that variety in the movement. But we also want to focus on the exploratory side, so we need to find that balance in how much we want to innovate on the mechanic and how much we want to give the player also a bit of rest to discover the environment, to find a new way. So as maybe percentage around the platformer and exploratory, for now we envisage it as a 50-50, like 50% platform innovation, 50% exploration, but we are still looking into how we can make it new and fresh all along the game for all the progression. So we are looking into this, and we think it might be the most important thing for us.
And if I may, a second one. If exploration is a key element for you, my perception was that like the experience can be also a bit linear, I would say, potentially. How do you want to push exploration in what you have?
We were looking into maybe a semi-linear exploration and unfolding of the world. By having stuff coming from Metroidvanias, for example, and unlocking abilities to go through passages that you couldn't go through before. Because it's important to illustrate it in the vertical slice, we don't want to go full Metroidvania, so that's why it's not really a reference in the slide, but we want to maybe go that way, see how new movements can unlock new passages, but also see how when you use your second vision of the spirit world, how it can change the already existing environment to make you discover it in a totally different way.
Thank you.
I have another question whenever it's my turn.
Yeah, you can go on if you want.
This might be a question as well for your teachers. I am not sure, and if I missed the information, I'm sorry, but can you clarify if the projects we're looking at are indie production that would be released by an indie team, maybe of 20 people over a 2 years work, or are we looking at AAA production that would be 100 million to produce with 70 people? But just to be able to judge the proposition itself.
I think I can clarify it. Depending on the projects, it's different. With the team, we choose our scope and our ambitions at the beginning of the project. So for every project, it might be different. For us, we are aiming maybe at AA because that's we made sure that everybody in the team was agreeing with that. So it might depend on the project, but for us it's more AA. And yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Alexandre, I also work at Ubisoft but Paris. So you mentioned climbing as the main goal of the game, but you also spoke about exploration. So climbing is going up, but exploration can also be going left or right or in front of you. Maybe on a level design point of view, you will have two types of players. So going up is like you want the fastest route, so perhaps handcrafted level design is better. But if you want to go explore far away, maybe some kind of level generation procedures may be interesting. So do you have any thoughts on this?
We didn't think about really at the beginning of the project because our ambitions were quite big for a small production time. We focused on how we can make it most simple for us to develop. And so we didn't think about maybe a costly way of generating levels, but we can look into it because it might also be interesting in that because the whole environment is full of huge trees, and it's meant to the player is meant to lose himself a bit in it, but we still want to deliver a bit of a narrative for the player, so linearity can be useful for it. As I said before, we were looking at references in Metroidvania and in environmental narrative, so we are still looking into how we can unfold it, if linearity or maybe like full exploration is a better way. We can't really say yet, but for the vertical slice, we anyway might go only for linear development because it's might be easier for us.
Thank you very much.
Just the last question.
Hello, I'm Fred, Ubisoft Paris and level designer, so I will bounce on the previous question. Actually, the procedural generation is really interesting, but you have very few months. And I think if you want to create a really good vertical slice, you should try to handcraft levels that are really good. And actually, do you know how you will handle the camera? Because you said that it will be a third-person camera, but it's a climbing game, so you don't have the classic camera in which you just show everything that you have in front of you. I think this would be really key for you. So if you have any idea of what kind of camera, because it's something quite new, you will have in your game.
We actually thought about which camera we wanted to use, even if it was in first person or third person. We decided to go on the third person way for the exploratory aspect. It facilitates your vision on of the surroundings and stuff like that. Because our environment is full of trees that might go in the way like at any time. If you want to jump from your surface to go at a tree behind you or stuff like that, the tree you're climbing on is on the way. So we thought about clipping, seeing through the tree you're climbing on, so that the character is always visible and you always know where you need to go. As some behaviors, we are looking into using tracks when you're climbing. It depends on the level design. If it's more like a tunnel or something like that, we can go back, put the camera on the track, and let the player climb with a clear view. We are looking also into small details, like how we can help him figure out distances for jumping. So by using targeting systems and stuff like that, offsetting the camera a bit so the target is always at the center and clearly visible. So we are looking into all of this because we know, yes, it's really important that it will be key for the clarity of the game. Yeah, we're still working on it, but it will be, of course, a good challenge.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to end the question and answers for now, and thank you very much for the team. And we're going to welcome the next one, who's the last beat. If you want to have extra exchange with the students, you're going to be able to go there at the break, during the breaks.
Can I just ask something, Catherine?
Oui, Audrey.
Yeah, it would be, yeah, exactly like that. It would be great if I could see the presentation because
Is it better now?
Yeah, it's a little bit higher, and that would be perfect.
Okay.
Merci.
Otherwise, you can also follow with the live, you know, on YouTube, the stream.
It's actually there's a lot of delay.
Okay.
So, it's confusing.
Okay. Okay. I will put it a bit higher.
Thank you very much.
As you wake up in a corrupted land, only a shell of your body remains. In your hollowness, the only thing that you still feel is the rhythmic pump of your heart. Guided by the pulse, discover what caused the disaster before your last beat. In the last beat, your character will progress through a corrupted world after a disaster, as we said, but you will have a fixed amount of heartbeats to do so, to go through this adventure. If this amount reaches 0, you die and respawn at your starting point. In order to gain ground efficiently in this hostile environment and with such a constraint, you will have to manage, to find ways to manage your heart rate in order to lose your heartbeat slower. So this game is an action-adventure game. We are aiming for indie games enthusiasts, but also action-craving players and challenge lovers. So the character will awaken after just that kind of catastrophe and tries to understand what happened. The controls will be third person, and the camera is a bit special because it will be a 3D world, but with 2D assets for the environment and the character in 3D. We are using, as a reference, Book of Travels, which is, as you can see here, well, the GIF is not very good quality, but you can see that the character is going in the depth of the environment. Let me tell you just a little bit more about the story of this game. This story will be told by environmental narration, and on this tiny illustration, which is an outline just to give you an idea of the map, the full map. Well, the vertical slice will take place somewhere in there. We're not sure for the moment. But, well, I will tell you a bit more about the story. So in a desertic world with a few oases of life, a mineral, which is fluid if moving and solid if static, it is a source of energy for the inhabitants, but it's highly hazardous. And one day, for no reason, apparently, it went out of control. So nobody survived, as the mineral corrupted almost everything by going out of the rivers. And nobody survived, not even you. So now, a soul remaining in an empty body, your only wish is to learn what happened. Your goal will be to evolve in this world, not going to a place in particular, but rather learning from what you see around you. So let's recap for a moment. We have a goal, which is the discovery of what happened, and we have a constraint, which is this inevitable death coming, which brings tension, and we have means in order to manage the heart rate at your disposal and bring fluidity to the gameplay. So these are our 3 pillars of design. Our main references are here. We have Hyperlight Drifter, Dark Souls, and Fury for the very action and high challenge gameplay. Okami is more a reference for the combat system, and you might have recognized the strong inspiration of the main mechanic coming from Minute, in which you have 60 seconds before you die. So as in Minute, you will inevitably die, but the difference here, however, is that you don't have just 60 seconds. It will be manageable a little bit because you have a fixed amount of heartbeats decreasing regarding the heart rate. And as in Minute, the death is not really the end. You will be able to respawn at your starting point or at your last checkpoint and continue. So the survival of the character will depend on the player's ability to manage and anticipate the heart rate of the character. And currently, in this phase of conception, we are exploring different means for the players to manage this heart rate. Because the camera is very particular, as you might have seen, the combat will be based on what we call a focus zone to help the player with distances perception. So the player can change the focus enemy with the joystick while this enemy is going into this focus zone, and if this enemy is going into, he will automatically aim to it. The combat system will be based on dash combat. So for the moment, we imagine 2 things, the first one is the rush. It's a dash when you just rush into the enemy, go through it, dealing damage, and you go behind it. And the second one is a blink. It's like a tiny teleportation. It allows the player to reposition the character and to dodge some attacks. So we can imagine many things with this, but for the moment, we imagined something like we call the chain dash attack. It's like when you rush through several enemies, they will be marked, and you can use the chain dash attack and go back through all of these targets and dealing more damage, and it's in an instant. So we talked a lot about combat, but it's also useful for the movement, like in the environment, to overcome obstacles, for example. For the moment, we are currently exploring all of the juiciest possibility for the dash system. So that's it. Now we'll let Jérémy talk about the art direction.
Thank you. For the artistic direction, here are our main points, the most important one. First of all, the blend between 2D and 3D. As we said earlier, we have a 3D character evolving in a 3D world made out entirely from 2D assets. To match with this blend between 2D and 3D, we choose a distinctive camera inspired by Book of Travel. Also, we wanted to stand out from the classic red-blue contrast that you might find in our different influences like Hyperlight Drifter. Because we want to stand out, we want to work on a personal color palette that will give some personality and some uniqueness to the world the character is evolving in. To match with this, we also are working on otherworldly sound design to give even more personality to the world. We also chose to blend retrowave and ethnic instruments to represent the opposition between the corrupted minerals and the ruins of its past inhabitants. Finally, we want the whole world to act like one giant heart, pulsing in one as one. And for this, we want the world to pulse in rhythm with the music. So now we're going to show you some mood boards that will give you a hint of what is inspiring the last beat. With this, you will be able to hear some ambience and music for the exploration part. So now let's see some concept art. First of all, the monolith. It's made out of the corrupted minerals, and it's very important in the game. As you might see, there are some veins on it that will pulse in rhythm with the music. We also have some environment concept for vegetation and construction of the past inhabitants. And finally, main character concepts. where you can see the character is half corrupted by the mineral, but is keeping control over it. And also, a main important thing is that he's carrying a big piece of mineral in his back. This piece is containing his soul, pulsing as a heart. And finally, let's hear some combat music.
So now let's talk briefly about our unique selling points. The first one is the originality of the theme of the heart and the gameplay that comes with it. The second one that we identified is the juicy combat mechanics with the dash system, that we have to work on this. And the last one is a unique artistic direction with such a distinctive camera and the blend between 2D and 3D. Just a little bit of an hint for the positioning. We really want to be not like Minute, actually. We really want to go to the action part of it. And with not the highest challenge, like not in Dark Souls or Fury, we actually want to bring some little accessibility, for example, with difficulty settings. Also, here are our main challenges, just to conclude. So the blend of 2D and 3D in Unity is kind of difficult, but we are making great progress on this. And also the dash combat system will actually need all of the team's care, as we really wanted to provide a strong game feel through fluidity, visual, and sound effects. And the last one is the heart rate management, because as I said, we are exploring various ways to manage this, the heart rate of the character, and we wanted to make sense regarding our heartbeat mechanics in the first place, so that's it. Thank you very much for your attention, and follow us on Twitter.
Thank you. First question, and we wait for the rest of the team to go down. If you can remind the function you have also. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks again for the presentation. Quite exciting. So my name is Benoit. I'm a game director at Ubisoft. You mentioned like the mechanics that goes with managing your heart rate. Can you be more specific on it, please?
Yes, of course. Actually, we are exploring, as I said, several possibilities. For the moment, we identified 3 of them. I can show you a little bit of this. I know, I don't have this. Oh, shit. Okay, sorry about this. But we prepared something to show you a little bit more about, what we talked earlier. Wait. Sorry. Okay, so well, I can try anyway. So the first one we imagined is a way for the character to meditate after combat, for example, to just slow down the heart rate afterwards and give some break also for the progression of the player. The second one is the possibility of having more passive breaks after combat, and passive things like, oh, okay. Oh, it works. Okay, so here's the meditation, as I said earlier. And the passivity, for example, for the player to avoid combat. So, because during combat, the heart rate will, of course, increase, etc. So, to play less aggressively is a possibility. And the last one we are really looking deeper on this is the rhythm. Because, for example, we can imagine that the player will make the inputs on rhythm to enhance his skills, or to, for example, manage his heart rate. For example, in combat, if he dashes on the rhythm of the music, it will allow the player to manage the heart rate and give it like in the same pace of the music.
Do you see ways to gain some heart rate, or you really have to manage your heart rate?
The idea really for us, the concept I mean, is really to manage this, and the death isn't, of course, like very punishing, because you are progressing, of course, during the game and find some checkpoints or create your own. We are thinking about this as well. But yeah, death is not the end. And we don't want to, for example, be able to find some more heartbeats, etc. Because, maybe it's a possibility, but we find it more interesting to have these mechanics of management of your own pace, etc. So for the moment, that's the concept.
So, Fred, level designer again. My question is, you have combat. What happens when you are hit? Do you lose heartbeats? Do you have a life bar? Or do you only speed the heartbeats? The heart rate?
So we are still investigating on that. There are a few different possibilities. First of all, the first possibility is that could increase your heart rate and so decrease your heartbeat faster, but you might be invincible to combat damage. Another possibility is that you have, like in most of games, a life total that decreases if you're being hit. And one last possibility is that you just have one life. You get one shot if you get hit. So those are the three possibilities that we are investigating, like for the combat.
I just feel like everything is connected around the heartbeats and heart rate. So if everything could be on the same system, I think it would be great. Plus, with the music, it means that the music is adapting to the heartbeat. It's a very big constraint.
Not really. No, not
really
really.
Interesting. Yeah. No.
About that, there are some way to, for example, you cannot match exactly the tempo of your heart rate, because it will be so fluctuant that the music wouldn't be hearable if we try to write something that is a bit in a classical way. It would be maybe if it was something more experimental, we could maybe do something that would match exactly to the heart rate. However, we can try to match the intensity by dividing the time, like doubling the hi-hat speed or things like that to give more tension. The higher you have a heart rate, things like that could be used to give tension when your heart rate increases, for example.
So last question, the rhythm part of the game is just based on the music and not on the heart rate of the character.
Yes, but it would have an impact on the heart rate. As we said, it's one of the possibilities we imagined. For the moment, we are not fixed on that. But yeah, if it's like that, then the rhythm will have an impact on the heart rate and not the contrary.
Yeah, it's pretty much a way to express like the breathing of the character, like making it in in the tempo of the music. Like it's him like forcing himself to breathe and like so to slow down his heart rate.
Just to add one last thing with that, it's because, as we said in the presentation, we want the whole world to pulse as one, and the closer you input in rhythm, the closer you can make your heart rate close to the rhythm and pulse in rhythm with the world itself. That's the idea.
I'm really happy with the heart beat limit because it's such a hard limit. But what's interesting is that with hard limits comes challenges, and by designing the center of a map will be something which may be easier than the edge of a map, but more advanced player will go to the edge of a map, and you can place some challenges here which only perfect ones can go there maybe. So it will be maybe interesting in your vertical slice to have a very little bit of tooling to enable you to more easily design this edge of a map, and this can be a way pour prévoir the building of your entire map edge, maybe. It was not a question, sorry.
Yeah, but it's really interesting. Thank you.
Hello, Yannick. I'm an academic from the University of Lausanne. I found fascinating the character with the corruption that he or she bears on themselves. Will that corruption evolve depending on the heartbeat, depending on the situation. I mean, it literally has the narrative on himself. So can you use it in combat? Does it slow you down sometimes?
Okay, so once again, like there are different possibilities. So the first possibility is that it stays like that all the time, but we are also investigating to have a few upgrades for the player. And for example, those upgrades could be having dashes that uses that mineral to imprison enemies in it, stuff like that. So there are a few ideas that are revolving around that idea of mineral. For example, another is that we could gate certain areas using that big blocks of minerals, and from one point the player can get through those. Like he can fuse with the mineral and just get through the block of minerals. So well, yeah, we have a few ideas like that.
I have questions too, but I can wait for my turn.
But it could be your turn. Go ahead, Audrey.
Okay. Just two questions. I'm guessing the scope and objective is like a small indie team, 1-2 years development. Is that so?
Yeah, around this. To take back your way of speech of the last AGV, actually we are aiming to make a triple I. So kind of, with a small team making a huge, well, not that huge game, but a very interesting game for the indie scene.
Thank you. And my second question, you can see it coming also, is what happens if we reach the end, if we manage to go all across the map? What's the big reward for the super skilled player?
Yeah. So actually, we didn't talk really about like the shape of the entire game yet, because like that's still in development. But one of the ideas might be that the game could be kind of Metroid-like, where you get more and more upgrades, and like the upgrades help you to go forward into the story. So there would be an end on the story, and so the player might be, all the player might be able to see the entirety of the map, or maybe not the entirety. Maybe we could like build some really hard challenges for the players to tackle. But like the idea is not like having a central point and the player going as far as he can. Like the idea is like the player following a little bit more like a storyline, like in Minute or games like that. I don't know if I was clear.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Another question? Yes, okay, I'm coming.
Thank you. Congratulations. Farhan Zilai, independent. I have a question for the character. Have you thought about the posture with the state of the heartbeat and his because you have something on his legs, and how he can manage to walk and fight? I don't know.
Okay, so just to be sure. Sorry. Okay, so for the moment we imagined together that maybe, of course, he's like full of corruption on his body, so maybe he'll be like a little bit clumsy in his movings, etc. So for the fight, as it is a dash system, we really wanted to like take the ground and push a lot to really give the strong feeling of that he, even if it's a skeleton, he's fast, but he's strong as well because of the corruption, etc. And I think that's it. Do you have any?
I would say does it affect the rhythm of the heartbeat?
You mean the actions
can
of
we
the
see,
character?
Can we see, for example, in the posture of the character, If it's affect the statement of the rhythm.
Yeah, maybe. I think it would be kind of relevant. I mean, if like we imagined a lot of the sound design about it, like when it's ending, we can imagine like the sound of the heart really beating in the ears. Well, the ears it's a skeleton, but I mean for the players, I mean, but like really beating as you are reaching the zero. And yeah, I think in the animations it can be relevant as well to see that the character is kind of, it's difficult, and things like that. So, they're lacking of energy.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, Salomé, lead artist, Ubisoft Bordeaux. I have a question about the camera. You said it's going to be a bit different. The character is going deaf, and also I've noticed it's going from the right to the left. Is it something made in purpose, or why? If it is in purpose.
Yeah, actually, we thought a lot about this because the kind of simplest way was to choose between 2D and 3D. But actually, we found a book of travels at the beginning of the development, and we were like, oh, that's really interesting. But a book of travel is kind of a game which is like really focused on exploration, seeing the scenery, etc. It's an MMORPG still in development. But what we thought actually, it would be an amazing challenge actually to go to blend this 2D and 3D and make an action game in such a camera. So this is just actually for the challenge, and because we appreciated this kind of camera and we think it might be bring a very interesting proposition on the market in general. So that's what we wanted to do.
Ribout, game designer at Ubisoft Bordeaux. So I will be talking about the camera. The camera in the book of, I don't remember his name, but I see the project, is quite low to enjoy the depth. And we know that isometric fight is hard in perception. Hyperlift Drifter has a camera that is quite high. Do you want to try this kind of camera, or do you want to manage to do a fight that will be pan from a low camera?
So we have two different cameras, kinda. So we have like the, moving camera while you are moving, and you have like the combat camera. So how the combat work is like it's a closed environment, and the camera is traveling left to right, and if the player is going to the depths, it's also like going up and tilting a little bit. So you have that. That helps the player to see a little bit better the perspective and the perception of the perspective, and also we have the focus zone that we talked a little bit earlier. That should help the player to appreciate the perspective, because like you don't need to aim at things. Like you're basically always aiming at one targeted enemy. So that might really help the player to appreciate the perspective.
Just to be clear, when you're in fight, you're in a closed context, like Okami. So you have to defeat the enemies to progress. You can't escape a fight. You can't choose to escape.
That's it. We thought it was like a really great way also to gate the player. To gauge the difficulty for the player, because like there would be some enemies that the player just could not kill, and so he would have to find another way to go, or another upgrade to have like to beat those enemies, or a new basically new upgrades. Yeah.
Thanks.
Is there another question or comment? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still Alexandre Trachet, tools programmer at Ubisoft Paris. So you mentioned we are on the right slide. You have, if you play on the rhythm during combat, you enhance your combat skills. Is it also true for the exploration without combat? Does constant rhythm, good rhythm management help you in exploring?
Actually, it will depend on what we want to do. As we said, this kind of possibility for the heart rate management would be like, yeah, really for the heart rate, or the rhythm might give some skills. If it gives skills in the combat, I think it's kind of also interesting to have those skills in the environment to overcome obstacles. Like, I don't know, if the rush is like really strong, it can break a rock or anything. Like, yeah, of course, it can be interesting.
And also like the rhythm in the environment, because like the music is not as as strong while you are exploring, discovering the world. It's a little bit harder to like hit an action on the beat. So we are still like looking for how to mix the two aspects of it. Like, do we keep that kind of rhythm part while we are moving or not? Like, we are still making a few research about that.
So this was the last question. Thank you again for your work.
Thank you, everyone.
And let's welcome the last project of this morning, Odds Living.
Ça ne te dérange point. Hello everyone. We're here to present you Odds Living, a 3D adventure platforming game where a movement will slowly kill you. So how? In Odds Living, a strange rule applies to people. Venturing in the dark will slowly start to turn your body into stone as you move, and eventually petrify you forever. Fortunately, in a world where light cannot be crafted, a giant sun provided enough to protect its creatures for thousands of years. But when it started to fade, everything changed. Chaos rose, and survival became everyone's fight. Many species disappeared. And then a new hope was found. Rising out of the planet's heart, a new light source was discovered, out of which people could build on again and live as a civilization. And that's the world you'll be experiencing in the game. So let's talk about sound. Music aims to be quite shy in the game. Although some themes are to be heard, most of the experience will be conveyed through ambiances according to the different environments you'll be progressing in. Let's hear some references. I'm not sure it's working. Okay, well, sorry. So let's just say that, yeah, we're aiming at some very low ambience music, and those specific ambiances will be quite dark and aimed at making the player feel lonely and feeling the grit of the kind of ambiances we aim to. So let's see what kind of environments we'll be walking through. So first, the core of the city. So in here, there's no challenges. Lights here for everyone who's allowed in it. So that's where most of the narrative elements will be brought to you as a player. Then further away from the core, the sectors belt, where loneliness reigns. And even though lights are provided to each sector, many dark and dangerous places still shade. Then finally, where none can survive, the Darklands. So how do we expand in such an hostile environment? We call you. You are a Pathfinder. So Pathfinders are the front line. They're provided with dark vision and movement enhancement technology, and they're the one we send where lights went off. That's where you're going. A week ago, an expedition was about to leave from Sector 34, but then
For unknown reason, the whole sector went dark, causing the loss and presumed death of hundreds. You were sent to investigate the case, fix the issues, and continue the expedition. Playing as a Pathfinder will need you to master each of your movements. You'll have to choose carefully which one you'll use to progress in your environment. You'll be feeling the thrill of dying with each step you take, facing mortal environments and maybe hostile creatures. But then you'll be the one exploring those wild and dangerous environments and discovering its secrets.
Thanks to Axel, we now know all about the backstory to our game. So how does it play? Odds Living is a third-person survival adventure game with movement at its core. This means you'll have access to a wide variety of moves, such as jumping, double jumping, dashing, or even wall running. While exploring the world we built for you, you might encounter upgrades. These will make your moves way more efficient and upgrade your movement modules. However, keep in mind, every move you make slowly turns you to stone. The same applies to your movement modules. If you use a move too much, you cannot use it anymore until you find another source of light. However, you aren't the only one looking for these sources of light. You will encounter enemies. They want the same thing as you. You will have to be discreet and find ways to make them move as much as possible. Once they're a statue, they cannot harm you. Our game is targeting an audience of young adults. Primarily, it would contain, we think, action-adventure players, but also narrative players and experienced players looking for a challenge. That is why we chose to sell our game as a one-time purchase to gain access to our whole 15 to 20 hours experience. Of course, so that everyone can get their hands on our game, we will sell it on every PC platform as well as every last generation console. Now, we'd like to talk a bit about the challenges we'll encounter during production. On one hand, we have design challenges. Our game is a complicated mix between survival and platformers. On top of this, our main mechanic is basically the more you move, the closer you get to a game over. So how do you balance it so that the players can have fun and still feel involved after 20 hours? On the other side, we have technical challenges. We are a small team of 9 students. And we're considering our scope, which is pretty large, and our time constraints, we have to find a way to make everything possible. We also chose to use Unity's high-definition rendering pipeline to get better visuals, but it's still in beta. This means it could be unstable and even bring bugs we did not expect. Lastly, we'd like to talk about our competitors. Being under the action-adventure genre, there are lots of other games. Merci. Oops. It's coming, don't worry. Yes, thank you. So, we have a lot of competitors, as you can see. We decided to sort them out by production value. So on the lower end, we have games such as Axiom Verge, made by one person, or even Canopy, hi. And on the other end, we have games made by hundreds of people, like The Last of Us. We see ourselves somewhere in the middle, with an optimum team size of around 40 people working on it to make a AA title. We would like to reassure you. We are certain and confident that we can stand out thanks to our uniqueness and originality. We have a dark, mysterious, and mystical universe, an audacious mix of gameplay mechanics, and of course, our unique stratification system. In Odds Living, moving is dying, but moving wisely is surviving. Thank you.
Thank you. While the rest of the team is coming, do you want to try again the sound, or?
Maybe. En fait, je crois que ça marchait, mais on entendait à peine.
You have to go back once more and then start again. No. Okay, so we will see if we can manage that. Do you have a first question? Yeah, thank you.
David Bowman, Creative Assembly. This is another one of those questions about scope, scale, and what you're going to be able to do in 4 months. You identify it as a challenge. How are you going to mitigate that challenge? What are you going to focus on that you can deliver that shows the promise of the game compellingly enough that you would get the opportunity to develop the rest of it?
So about our vertical slice, we're aiming to first, of course, reduce the kind of environments we'll be presenting, since we're not being able to build every kind of environment we presented. Then, of course, our game is a lot based on progression, as you said. So we are aiming to, we're actually developing a system to have a lot of progression, like small parts gathered in all different kind of levels. So even though you'll be only playing a little bit of the game, you'll be still feeling the experience. And then, if you have anything to add.
And so follow-up is in that small slice, how much of the character am I going to experience?
The character itself will be putting emphasis on its movement abilities, but then, and of course, action adventure. But then, as far as the story, of course, we are not going to be able to put a lot on its personality and the conflicts, even though we are actually designing a huge story. Of course, we're going to try as much to represent it in the vertical slice, but of course, we are firstly going to put emphasis on gameplay, movement, and adventure.
Thank you.
I have a question. I can wait for my turn too.
Go, you can go.
I have a little bit of trouble visualizing how you actually control the character and how you make this, which seems to me like tactical decisions on what to do and where to go, since every movement is basically costing you a lot. Is it going to be like free 3D roaming with a third-person camera, or is there going to be like a grid of tactical movements that you can achieve, or how do you see that?
Yeah, it's actually a 3D free roaming where you'll have different types of cameras to envision better the kind of environments you're progressing in. And as far as managing your resources, so we went quite fast on the presentation, but to be a little more precise about it, you have a set of a movement, like Morgan said, and each use of this movement will deplete itself, and you'll have then, as much as you go, you'll have lesser move sets until you get a chance to recharge again. So you'll have to always, like at the first part of a milestone where you're fully recharged, you have a lot of movements left. You can choose everything you can do, but since you're progressing and then finding light only like maybe 5 minutes later, you'll have to progressively be a lot more careful about what you're using. So yeah, that's the idea, to like have this progression of tension to like for at the beginning you'll be free roaming almost as you want, and then as much as you go, you'll be a lot more careful.
Thank you.
It's me. So you talk a lot about the management of the movement abilities. It's interesting, but aren't you afraid of making it in the end a puzzle game? Because if you have a limitation of movements, maybe you will have a specific solution at some point, and maybe you will lose some part of the survivalism aspect.
Yeah, that's one of the most dangerous challenges. So of course, our vision is definitely not to make an actual puzzle game. We actually, if we talk about semantic, we are mostly interested in problems rather than puzzle, since there will never be only one solution. But yeah, the idea is not to be. Let's say that our level design philosophy is a risk reward. So there will always be a safe path that you will be able to follow. But of course, since as I said before, there will be a lot of upgrades and bonuses in the game gathered all around. You'll have to make choices of what path you'll be entering, and then maybe we are definitely not wanting to make a puzzle game and death die and retry game. So yeah, that's the idea and a challenge.
We'll talk about that, because what is the time scale of a try? Like I begin to play, I make a lot of errors and I die. How do you manage this? Where I will respawn? Because platforming is about experimentation, and the survival game is about committing to choices and assuming the shit that happened after. So, what's the length of a session where I take bad choices, and what happened next?
So the idea is that if you take bad choices, most of the time you'll be able to come back and recharge. But then, so of course, there are a lot of systems we didn't talk about. For example, you'll have some consumable that you will be able to use when you want, but limited, so that you can have you can make errors, and then, but it will always be like just as I said, this won't be a die and retry game. The idea is that you can make errors, just if you make too many, you'll eventually die. But the idea is to put emphasis on, like, for example, in I'm going to say a weird reference, but in Doom, where you always feel like you're going to die, but actually you don't, where we definitely want to put tension on the player, where he actually doesn't really feels, he feels like he's going to die, but actually he doesn't. That's the idea.
I will also add on this question. For me, survival games are also about player choices. And for example, if I, as a player, I run out of a certain type of move, and I know I'm blocked. As your ability seems to be linked with the glowing sticks that are like. Can I choose as a player to scavenge, like to remove the glowing stick from my move I still have, for example, a dash, and okay, I need to jump, I make a decision of stripping away my dash, but I can still jump again. Is it some kind of player choice you want to give?
We didn't thought about that for yet, since we were thinking about one of the issues we wanted to avoid is that some players would like master one kind of movement and always use only this type, and we wanted to provide a set of tools that he would be forced to use, since as he's using his favorite types, he eventually will have to use the one he likes the less, and then be forced to play the game with the whole set of tools we want. But that's an idea, that's an interesting idea. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Yeah.
Thank you. Can you explain a little bit about the animation of the character and the gameplay?
I'm not sure I understand. Like the
because the character loses her abilities, and how can we see?
Yeah, the abilities are, as said before, linked to the glowing sticks on different body parts, because they represent how the power left in each technology part. because the moveset is heavily linked to the technology the character is wearing that allows her to do kind of almost superhuman movements, such as dash and double jumps. And so the animations is trying to show also how the technology is helping the player. Like, for example, the legs have this kind of propelling devices on the back of the tibias, so she can do the dashes, for example. There is some tubes on the forearms that allows for the wall working and stuff like that.
And when she loses the energy?
Yeah, well, if basically if the glowing stick on the body part is shut off, it means that this moves is not available anymore. So it's like on this limb, she's only got the human mobility. So this prevents from, for example, from the arms, she cannot wall run anymore because she doesn't have the technology working anymore to support the wall running.
So she could die?
Or what?
Not? The character could, the player could die if.
Oh yeah, sorry. The thing is, there is the glowing sticks on most body parts for the technology, and on the back there is the basic life support functions that allows, for example, the safe moves like walking, and it's like there is a priority, like this, the minimum amount of energy that has to go into the leg technology to allow for the walking, but dashing consumes too much, so like life support is needed here.
Okay,
so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I don't know if this is a question or if it's just a comment on what you just said. The interface that is present to the player, if you're trying to embed the information in 3D around the character, then the camera becomes even more important about the ability to see that information. So often we split the UI elements that need to be globally accessed and always known away from the character. And it sounds like you're trying to keep that wrapped around the character and embedded in the game, and I respect that, but it's going to be one of your big challenges. So it's not a question, it's an observation that doing this means you're going to be spending a great deal of your time trying to find good answers to camera and information exchange. So that's comment.
Yep.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You said that loneliness reigns, that everything is very obscure, there's no light, and that the character is turning into stones. How are you going to make sure that the player doesn't get depressed while playing your game?
Wow, that's hard. Let's say, I guess the feeling, the gameplay, since you're using a character who's very skillful in its movement, so I guess while playing it you'll feel the pleasure of mastering what you're doing. But yes, of course, the ambience seems to be quite dark, and the story too, so it's definitely going to be a challenge. So yeah, thanks for another fear.
Yeah, just to add, at one point you talked about humor in the game.
Humor, you mean?
Humor, didn't you?
Nope.
No.
Sorry.
Okay, sorry. There's a joke in this slide, at least.
You go.
Yeah, sorry. This is basically because I was doing the research. It's not linked to the presentation. It is the character that has the most neons on her. So. Also, to partially, sorry about that. Also, to partially answer the question, although it is true that the universe is quite dark, there is also kind of an almost poetic sense to it. Like when you go to these impressive, gigantic, abandoned places, One of the inspiration we had is the idea of urbex. When you walk into this kind of impressive, abandoned places, it is dark and it has something depressive to it, but there is also a certain poetry, I guess, to it.
Look at inside, right?
What?
Look at the game inside, right? It's okay to be in a depressive environment sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also agreeing on this question because I think, from my feeling is, your character is a pathfinder. Is what you said. It sounds like a light bringer, like a hope bringer, and most of around him is lightless and depressing. So yeah, maybe some kind of contrast between the light, which is life, and the stones. Yeah, can be interesting to dig.
Another question or comment? Otherwise, we're gonna stop for this morning. So thanks again for your presentation. So it's time for the lunch break. We have 2 hours. So you will have time to have lunch, but also to visit the students where they're working on top. So please do so. And be back for 15 to 3, please. Thank you. And thanks again to all the teams. So if you want to give a last round of applause.